The October rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it seemed intent on tearing the sky apart. Elias stood before the Sterling residence, his grip tightening on his umbrella as it trembled against the gale. The structure before him was a monolith of tempered glass and black steel, perched precariously on the edge of the cliff. Under the sweeping beam of a distant lighthouse, it didn't look like a home. It looked like a giant, cold aquarium, floating amidst the night and the storm. The automatic sliding door hissed open before Elias could even ring the bell. Silence. Inside, it was dry, yet the air carried the faint, unsettling scent of stagnant water and damp moss, clumsily masked by expensive air freshener. "You're early," the voice floated down from the spiral staircase. Madeline Sterling stood there, blending into the shadows. She wore a long ivory silk dress that hung off her frame like a shroud. Her hair was sodden, dripping water onto the expensive oak floor, even though she hadn't stepped outside. Elias swallowed hard, forcing his voice into a professional tone. "Good evening, Mrs. Sterling. The agency said the twins require special sleep monitoring." Madeline didn't answer immediately. She descended the stairs, her bare feet making absolutely no sound. She stopped close to him, too close. Elias could feel a radiant coldness emanating from her pale skin. Her eyes were wide, dark, and hollow, staring past his shoulder into the void. "They aren't sleeping," Madeline whispered, a slender finger pressed to her lips. "They are playing hide and seek, and the only rule of this house, Elias, is that you must never find them. If you see them, pretend you are blind." Outside, the waves crashed against the cliffside, sounding like the screams of 1,000 children rising from the abyss. The master bedroom door clicked shut, leaving Elias alone in the vast expanse of the living room. The house possessed an artificial silence. While the storm raged against the reinforced glass walls, the inside was so quiet that Elias could hear the blood rushing in his ears. He began his rounds. His job was to monitor the temperature and humidity for the children, but strangely, there were no medical monitors, just a smart home panel blinking a weak, rhythmic blue light on the wall. Elias approached the hallway leading to the nursery. The black marble floor gleamed, reflecting his distorted shadow. Splash. Elias froze. He heard it, not the wind. It was the sound of wet, slap-like footsteps running on the stone. "Hello?" Elias called out softly. His voice was swallowed by the emptiness. No answer. As only a trail of water on the dry floor, a single small trail stretching from the kitchen and vanishing right in front of the nursery door. Elias frowned. He crouched down, touching the liquid. It was freezing, viscous. It smelled of dead kelp, a scent that had no place in a pristine $1 million mansion. He looked up at the nursery door. It was heavy oak, windowless, contrasting sharply with the glass architecture. There was no nameplate, only scratch marks. Dozens of them, deep and frantic, etched into the wood at the height of a 3-year-old child. The clock struck 2 a.m. The storm outside intensified. Elias sat on the sofa, trying to read, but the sensation of being watched was overwhelming. The glass walls had turned into black mirrors, reflecting the interior from every angle. Suddenly, the house's smart speaker system crackled to life. A distorted, static-laced sound filled the room. "Mommy? Cold?" Elias bolted up, heart hammering. Mrs. Sterling, do you need assistance? No answer from the speakers. Instead, the sound of water began. Rushing water, faucets blasting at full force. It was coming from upstairs, directly above his head. Elias raced up the spiral staircase. He knew the rule, never find them, but his instinct as a nurse overrode his fear. Reaching the second-floor landing, he saw Madeline. She was standing with her back to him, facing a glass wall that looked out into the pitch-black ocean. She was swaying gently, her arms cradled in front of her as if holding an invisible infant. "Shh," Madeline whispered, her voice trembling with a sick, twisted affection. "Don't cry, Noah. Don't cry, Lucas. Mommy is drying you off." Elias held his breath, merging with the shadows. He squinted at her arms. There was no baby, but the chest of her silk dress was soaked. A dark stain spread across the fabric, as if she were clutching a melting block of ice against her body. Water dripped from the invisible child, pooling around her feet. Madeline began to sing, a lullaby, off-key and chilling. "Sleep now. The waves are still. Down in the deep, no one will disturb you." Elias stepped back, yet the realization hit him like a physical blow. This woman wasn't just mentally unstable. She was being haunted by her own guilt, or worse. The house was feeding her delusion. 3:45 a.m. Madeline had returned to her room. Elias couldn't take it anymore. Curiosity and moral responsibility gnawed at him. He needed to know what was in that nursery on the first floor. What if there were actual children locked in there? What if they were being neglected? He grabbed his flashlight and crept toward the scratched oak door. The handle was ice cold. He turned it slowly. Unlocked. Crack. The dry hinges groaned. Elias pushed the door open, bracing himself to see malnourished or sick children. But he was wrong. His flashlight beam swept across the room. His pupils contracted in shock. This wasn't a bedroom. The floor was recessed by 2 feet, lined with blue pool tiles. And there were no beds, just 2 massive glass tanks dominating the center of the room. They were filled with a murky greenish liquid, bubbling softly from a filtration system. In the dim light, Elias approached the left tank. A label was neatly taped to the glass. Noah. He shone his light into the water. Something was floating in the suspension. A doll? No. It was a small skeleton, wrapped in rotting pajamas, drifting aimlessly amidst synthetic algae. A black wig bobbed in the water like a poisonous jellyfish. Elias clamped a hand over his mouth to stifle a scream. He stumbled back, bumping into the second tank labeled Lucas. Inside, the horror was identical. This wasn't a nursery. It was a glass mausoleum. Madeline hadn't buried her children. She had preserved them, keeping them in this house so she could pretend, night after night, that they were still there. Suddenly, the hum of the pumps stopped. A dead silence fell. Then, from right behind Elias, close to his ear, a wet, raspy voice spoke. "You found them." Elias spun around. Madeline was blocking the doorway, but the elegance was gone. Her face was sagging, skin dripping like melting wax. Her eyes were stretched wide, tearing at the corners. She opened her mouth, and instead of a scream, a torrent of black water spewed from her throat. "You found them!" The scream wasn't sound. It was a shock wave. Crack. The glass tank shattered. Water exploded outward. But it wasn't normal water. It was heavy, freezing, and smelled of rot. It rose with impossible speed, defying physics, flooding the room to Elias's knees, then his waist in seconds. Elias lunged for the observation window. He grabbed a metal chair and smashed it against the glass. Thud! The reinforced glass didn't break. Beyond the pane, he saw Madeline's reflection, gigantic, distorted, smiling. The water reached his chest. Beneath the murky surface, Elias felt them. Small, cold, slippery hands grabbing his ankles, dragging him down. They were incredibly strong. "Stay here. Play with us," whispers echoed through the liquid. In his final moment, as the water rose above his head, Elias saw Madeline swimming toward him through the room, moving with the grace of a monstrous mermaid, her arms wide open to welcome the new member of the family. The next morning, the sky was clear. The local sheriff stood before the glass house, scribbling in his notebook. "No signs of forced entry. The interior is completely dry," he said into his radio. The homeowner, Mrs. Sterling, says the night nurse left in the middle of his shift without notice. Probably couldn't handle the pressure. The camera pans past the officer, looking through the glass walls. Madeline Sterling sits on the sofa, smiling gently, caressing a new job application file. But in the far corner of the living room, sitting on a pedestal, is a brand new, small aquarium. If you look closely, resting at the bottom of the tank, is a tiny diver figurine. It's wearing a nurse's uniform, and its painted eyes seem to be staring out in absolute desperation.